You know, back when I was 19 years old, I was given the best piece of advice that I've ever received. I was told, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. Let's talk about that. Hello, and thank you for joining When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I'm joined by Angela Dunn Cartledge. Angela is a working mom of triplets who lives in Knoxville with her family. She has been working mostly in finance her entire career, but wanted a way to connect and tell her story on a deeper level. She started a podcast called Been There, Done That in March 2024 and has never looked back. Her goal is to reach the silent sufferers who are grieving and stuck, but don't know where to turn. Welcome, Angela. Great to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Daryl. I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. You know, I was fortunate to be on the Been There, Done That podcast recently, and very cool. We had a wonderful conversation, which led me to want to have you on my podcast, and I'm so glad you decided to do that. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited I'm very honored to be a part of it. I think it's always a compliment to be invited to be on someone's show. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Our discussion on your podcast was really, really cool. So I figured, let's do it again, or let's expand upon it, or whatever. And I don't know if I knew that you were in Knoxville, but I was just there last weekend for the Blake Shelton concert, and my wife and I went to that. So that was actually a ton of fun. He's just such a great entertainer. So yeah, and then we hung out in Knoxville a little bit and, checked out some of the cool stuff around Knoxville. So that was really, really nice.
It's a really cool town. I'm originally from Atlanta. So to be here and to be so immersed in the college town environment is so different for me, but I really love it. It is a really cool town, and there's so much that's changing about it just by nature of how everybody is sort of moving around in our country, and it just really works. It's a really great place. There's really great geography. There's great food. It's a really great place to be. So super cool.
Yeah, it is. We visited a few spots, but the Old Town area I thought was really cool. The World's Fair Park was really cool. That was just things I had never seen. And I know I've been to Knoxville because my mom's side of the family was in Cumberland Gap, Tennessee.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we used to go down there every single year to my Aunt Clara's farm and enjoy visiting with her and that sort of thing, but hadn't done it forever. So I'm sure I was in Knoxville as a kid, but I don't remember it. So it was nice.
Yeah, it's definitely different. We've lived here for 10 years, and I can't believe the differences just in that little short amount of time. So I'm sure that you got to see new things and at least got to experience some of it. That's super fun. Next time, now that we know that I live here and that you come here, then maybe we can hang out.
Yeah, have a little coffee or something. I think that would be very cool.
That'd be awesome.
We loved the venue. I think it was the Thompson something center at UT. So what a great place to see a concert. So anybody who goes there who's next that we want to see, we would definitely make the trip. It's only 2.5 hours, so it's easy for us.
It's so great because the college has such great logistics built around it that there's places to park, there's places you can get around that area so easily, and definitely with food and all of those kinds of wonderful things too. So you can really make a fun night of it. You're absolutely right. It's really cool to be able to utilize the college in so many ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer, and certainly you are too, based on your podcast, that stories are so critical and so important and so much a part of what we have to give back to the world. My podcast, When I Stop Fighting, my entire look at the world is, okay, can we stop the wrestling match? Can we stop the battle with ourselves or with other people or with, whatever it is, mostly ourselves, interestingly enough. And so I'm very interested to hear your story and what brought you to the point that, of today, when you decided you wanted to do the Been There, Done That podcast. And I'm sure it'll do a lot of people a lot of good. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that, that'd be great, Angela.
I'd love it. And I think there is a lot to be said for acknowledging that you have a story to tell. I think so many of us say, well, my life has just been boring, or it's not going to help anybody. And I think there's so much benefit to just giving yourself permission to do it. So I'm so, like I said, honored to be here, to be able to do this with you. And like you said, we've already had a conversation, more than one, and it's nice to have that safe space. So thank you for creating that for not just me, but all of your guests. I originally, I've always been a storyteller. I've always been the person that my friends and my siblings would reach out to if they wanted a story told, especially when I was really young. If I was ever in even at a sleepover or anything, my friends would say, tell us a bedtime story. And I would make it up as we were sitting there. So there's always been this need to create a story and to be able to tell it and to connect the dots within the story. And when you see your own story in that same way, it, to me, it gives it its own life, and it gives it a dynamic way for it to be able to live in the world. So I started to think about my story in a slightly different way, because I wanted to write it into a book. I wanted to make it into a big story and be able to get it out into the world that way. And I had a lot of fear around that. I had a lot of fear around what my story would look like and what anybody might think of that story. So I took that and sort of held it back, but realized that the way that I was going to intend to tell my story was going to be pretty chapter based and episodic, if that makes any sense. And then it sort of lent itself to a podcast. And that's kind of how I got to where I am now, where I invite other people to come in and tell their stories just like you do. But my story starts really early on in my life, where I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a storyteller, but I also wanted to be a mom. And I spent a lot of my early years thinking, if I can just get to the point where I can be a mom, I'll be all set. I can figure out the rest as I go. And that did not go as smoothly as I would have expected. In fact, I joke all the time that, especially in our generation, we were told that the act of making a baby, that can change your life. You just do that one time, and then you've got a baby, and then that's it. And that was not my experience. So I had a lot of struggle around trying to become a mom. My husband kept thinking and saying out loud, maybe this just isn't for us. Maybe this isn't the path that we need to continue to go down. And I had lots of family members and friends that said very similar things. Maybe you're just destined to be a really great aunt. Maybe you're just destined to be a dog mom. And the more that we continue to go through our process, the less I found myself and found this other purpose that really sort of took over and became the narrative of what we were trying to accomplish. There were intense pitfalls and intense highs of the process that I can go into all kinds of nitty-gritty detail about. But I think that the point that I wanted to make in telling my story is that infertility had, at least for me, had a huge stigma around it. Nobody I knew had struggled with the inability to have a baby. In fact, I always got the opposite advice. Just calm down and don't think about it so much, and then your process will be a lot easier. My grandmother would even joke with me that she never even had to. She just washed their clothes together, and that solved the problem for them. They just kept having children. So it's those kinds of things that that we say to each other, that we create in our story as obstacles, but ultimately we tried. I think we tried everything. We tried all the things that doctors recommended to us to do, and nothing worked. Then we tried scientific intervention, and those things worked, but only temporarily. We were able to get pregnant using in vitro fertilization of our own genetic material, and that ended in our son passing away in his sleep at 9 months old. And so from there, the experience took a kind of a nasty turn in my world, in my soul, because I really thought that my identity was tied to whether or not I was going to be a mom. And when that doesn't happen for you the way that you think it will, you start to question your worth. You start to question, what is it about your story that is, and what is it about you that makes you different? Like I said, my grandmother used to tell me jokingly and on purpose that she didn't have to do anything to get to that point. So she didn't have any advice to give me. And so those moments of loss then turn into other stories all by themselves. They sort of become different threads that come out from the main story. And we struggled mightily in our marriage as a result of it. I've said this several times, and I think this is the first time I've said it on a podcast, but I wanted to have a baby more than I wanted to be married. And I just wanted it to work. And when you lose sight that much of the goal, or of the relationship and the connection that you have with somebody because of the goal, that's where lots of things break. And the cool thing that I saw in that story, that what I can see now in that part of the story, is that the analogy or the metaphor that we use, that in order for a seed to become a plant, it has to completely shatter into pieces to let the plant out of the seed. And to me, that's exactly what happened, was that the idea that I had about what my life was going to look like had to completely blow into a million pieces and be completely shattered in order for the real part of my story, our story, to be born. We got connected to a concept. My sister-in-law was at a baby shower, which is oddly enough, the way that this came into our world. But she called and said, "Have you ever heard of embryo adoption?" And I said, "Well, I know what each of those two words mean, but I don't know how they make a story. How does that fit into my life?" And she said, "Just look it up, because I just found out about it, and I think it's a good option for you guys." And ultimately it was. It was a very similar process to a live birth adoption, in that we put our name in the hat. And at the time, it was an actual book where our little picture was in a book. And then, somebody's flipping through a book to look through and find the family that they want to be able to give their genetic material to. We just did not make healthy babies. Between our first son being born and losing him, we also miscarried at 12 weeks. So we did not make healthy babies. So this gave us an option to create a healthy child that didn't have to struggle like our first two children did. And then be able to have the family that we really wanted to have. And so what that resulted in, as Daryl read in my bio, was triplets. It was not something that we intended to happen. Just so that everybody that's listening knows, no one intends to have high order multiples. That's not something that you go into the process wanting to happen, because it is incredibly risky. So people would say, when they first met us and saw the babies, they would say, is that what you were trying to do? Were you trying to have more than one? No, we were just trying to have one healthy baby. That's it. So it was really, we got three for the effort of one. And let me tell you, it was a lot of effort on all fronts. So that's my main story that I like to tell, because to me, it has, like I said, lots of lows, but some high, wonderful points as well. And the thing that I love the most about it is that we weren't willing to give up, and we weren't willing to take no for an answer. We were going to have a family no matter what that might look like. So I want to give hope to anybody that is experiencing an infertility situation, or even a change in your family status, that you can do the thing that you are looking to do. It wasn't in my story to change my mind. That just wasn't part of what was going to be in my heart and in my end result. But I also know that people change their minds and decide not to have family at all. So ultimately, I love that the story ends in a hopeful way, but that there's still more story to be told. They're growing. They just turned 12 at the beginning of February. And so we have a lot more story, I hope, to learn and to tell going forward. But that's where my story kind of starts, if that makes sense. That's the main trunk of my story.
Angela, thanks so much for sharing your story. Unbelievable in terms of just, it hit me, and that's a lot. That's a huge just heartfelt, tough stuff, and so having the courage to tell that story and just be vulnerable in that way, I think, is just such a wonderful thing. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
One thing I wanted to explore, and you had mentioned it, and one of the things about growth and moving forward in life and changing and overcoming is that it sometimes, and many times, I would venture to say most times, it takes those dark moments. It takes those difficulties. It takes, like you mentioned, shattering the seed, right? To get to that growth and to get that growth moving again. And so one of the things that struck me when I was on your show was, you're just a very soulful person, and that's a beautiful thing. And I love soulful people. I just think that gets me here too. So did the soulfulness come from those experiences? Was that sort of how that showed up? And if you wouldn't mind just, jumping in with that, the shattering the seed and the growth and the soulfulness, I'd love to explore that.
Thank you. That's a really great question. And I never, nobody's ever given me that compliment. So thank you. I'm thinking through what you're saying and what you're asking. I've always been told that I was someone that people could count on, that they could go to for lots of different reasons, for somebody that would help, somebody that would listen, somebody that would be able to help problem solve, all those things kind of all at once. And I know to your point, that the shattering created a much different perspective for me. That when you start to want something, when you're a child and you start to think, this is what I want when I grow up, this is what I want to be when I grow up, this is the thing I want to do, this is the person I want to look for, whatever that thing is that you start to think about when you're in those formative years, you truly believe that you can do it. You have no concept of adversity and what that potentially could be. But I had a guest on my show that once said it so poignantly, that he said, but once you've seen the adversity, once the bad thing happens, you get a totally different perspective. Now you know it's possible. Now you know it could happen again. And so it's not really fear per se. It's more just about, it's like I leveled up, if that makes any sense. Like there's so much more that I could see. And for me, I did take it a significant fear route, in that I wanted to protect everything around me from any possible hardship, any possible heartache. And that's not my job. And so that was part of my growth as well, was to, and I'm still working through this, that I am not the rescuer of the universe. I am not, while I mean, I think that'd be awesome to be that kind of a superhero. I don't want that kind of responsibility. So it is that, it's that sort of a concept that we go into a situation or with hopes and dreams, and when they don't exactly happen like we expect them to, or like we saw it happen to someone else, we only live by our own examples, right? We can only do what we have seen and what we know. So for me, that process was just, now I could almost see further. I could see more opportunity, good and bad, about what could happen in our world. And I really appreciate your perspective on what that looks like for you to experience interacting with me, because that to me is I don't know it any other way. And I really would love to continue to be able to listen. If nothing else, this podcast has taught me that there's so much more that I can learn if I just shut my pie hole and let somebody else speak it. So that, it's just a giant lesson that I've learned over the last year. But the shattering of the seed for me, that immediate need to grow, created the space for it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think and we can get shattered many times, and the seed can shatter many times. And, we have the seed, and then the plant grows, but then the plant sheds the seeds and those shatter, so it's interesting how that functions in terms of just relating that to our own growth. You mentioned leveling up, which that's been a mantra of mine for a long time, from whence I came, and just wanting to be better. And a big thing was and I just talked about this on a recent podcast with a guest. All I really wanted was to feel better. And that's all I wanted when I was at the beginning of my journey. But it's not just about wanting to feel better. It's about the journey to becoming better. And then I'll feel better, and I think that's the interesting part to me. As your friend mentioned about, once you see that adversity, and then that it can happen, you just acknowledge that can be a part of the journey. And I think that expands over time to, for me, it's expanded over time to, you know what? There's a requirement that I have to go through some difficult stuff for me to grow. It's just a requirement. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to get my butt kicked a few times, and that's the way that it happens. But learning to look at that as stepping stones as opposed to, oh no, or poor me, or it's their fault, or whatever that is, whatever that looks like. Just like, hey, it's part of the journey, and each step in that journey, as long as I'm willing, to me, allows me to step again and to move forward again. That's kind of how I picture what you had said.
I love that. And I see it too in your message of stopping fighting, because we can try to hold the seed extra tightly and think, we just don't allow, if we hold it extra tightly, then maybe the shattering won't be as violent, or it won't be as painful, or whatever that might look like. But that's not up to us. We're fighting against something that is naturally going to happen. And the more we allow and just process what's happening to us, I feel that's a better way for us to be able to get through. And I don't like to use the phrase "get over something," because I feel like that implies that you can sort of wash your hands and let it wash down the drain and then move on with your life. But that's not exactly how it works. It's all part of the building process. You talk about the early stages of your story that you and I've already talked about a couple of times, and how brilliant the process was at reminding you that you cannot control all of the pieces that you want to control, right? That you are trying so hard but because I know there's pain, if I don't do this other thing, then I won't feel the pain anymore. Or if I numb the pain, or if I ignore the pain, or if I, whatever those things are that we do to ourselves, it makes that process longer. You don't understand that you're doing that to yourself. You think you're making it shorter, because in the short term, you don't have to think about it or feel it. But in the long term, now I have all of this time that I have to process through, instead of just the events that were happening to me at the time that they were happening to me. So I guess I also see it as an opportunity to not fight against the thing that is happening. You made this point just a few minutes ago, that we can be in denial, and we can stick our heads in the sand and say this isn't happening to us, or we don't want to admit to it. But that doesn't change the fact that it is there, and that you do have to work through it, and not not fighting against it. To me, has been such a profound lesson that it's just, I can't tell you the difference in my mindset in the short amount of time that we've known each other, because that is just such a cool way to frame what we do to ourselves. And we do it to ourselves all the time, and stop ourselves from processing and moving through something. So yeah, it's true in that we don't have to make it harder, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah. No, agreed. It's powerful to, and thank you for saying that. I very much appreciate it, Angela. It's very powerful to understand that if we relinquish the fight from our side, literally the fight can stop. Literally the fight can not happen if I'm not fighting. because I'm usually the one that's fighting.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about lessons, and you said going through things, which I 100% agree with. It's life is set up in such a way, at least that I've found, that if I get a lesson and it's handed to me, here it is on a silver platter, Daryl, learn this. And I'm like, no, I don't want to learn it. I'll get it again.
Oh.
And maybe it's a little bit more difficult this time. And then it's like, I don't really feel like learning. I haven't hurt bad enough.
Right.
And then I get it again, right? But the amazing thing is once I learn that lesson, the same stuff doesn't show up anymore. It's new stuff. It's new things that I need to learn. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And then I must ask myself, okay, who's in charge of all this stuff? Because how does that work? Right.
Right. I love the phrase that you should never pray for patience, because you will continue to get that lesson over and over again. Okay,
Yeah.
great. If you want patience, then I'll just keep throwing more stuff until you figure out patience. And that is that to me is the perfect example of what you're saying, that we, by ignoring or by not looking in the mirror when we have those moments to do so, we create a situation where we're going to relive it. We're going to continue to have to deal with it again and again until we actually do come out on the other side of it. And we always joke too that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but it's not a linear process to grieve. It's not a linear process to deal with hardship and trauma and things like that happen to us. But the point is, being able to process is the way that you will, and it doesn't necessarily make it faster, but it definitely makes it so that you aren't repeating it multiple times, to your point, that you don't have to continue to do that over and over again to learn that lesson that you were given the opportunity to. And I would venture to say that you and I are not alone in that concept, that we do it from a very young age. We're taught from a very young age that if we don't ride our bike recklessly down the hill, then we won't fall off. Okay, so then there's a big check mark. We can keep from falling off and skinning up our knees. And that construct doesn't exactly translate into the things that we get to do as grownups. It's not as simple as that, right?
No, it's not. And the interesting thing about my childhood is if they would have said, don't go down the hill, that's exactly where I'd go. Like, okay, Let me find the hill with all the big rocks and I'll wipe out,
the most possible risk factors that we can add into the bike ride. Of course.
Right. And I'll do it again. And then once I've, broken something or, hurt bad enough, I'll be like, okay, maybe I don't need to do that anymore, which I think is, very similar to how I have chosen to live life at times. But that's okay. I don't lament anything that has happened. And there's tough things. There's tough things for everybody on this planet. Nobody's going to skate through with easy stuff. And so I think one of the things that they had mentioned to me, and I was involved in the 12 steps, and that was kind of my roadmap for living early on. But one of the things that they tried to tell me very early was, look, man, it's difficult. It's really difficult to change the way that you live. And just because you're doing that doesn't mean that difficult things aren't going to continue to happen to you. You're just going to need to get better.
The way that you perceive and the way that you handle life is now better and different, not that life gets better and different. Like we're all going to struggle. It's kind of it's the way of the world. But I also think it's amazing to talk through this at a bigger level because all of humanity is in the same boat. We all have, no matter what our culture looks like, no matter what our childhood looked like, no matter what part of this earth we're from, we are all in the same boat in that life is a struggle. And it doesn't make a lot of sense why, but we all try to create reasoning around it. We have all kinds of belief systems that create reasoning around it, but we don't accept it as much as we should. And that's what I think is so powerful about the 12 steps, is that there's so much more discussion about acceptance, that as soon as you stop fighting against it is when the fight stops. It's such a cool way of understanding that the reason, even if you were fighting with another person, the reason that they're fighting with you is so that you fight back. It's the whole concept of it. And if we don't push, if we just sort of listen and understand and try to be aware of what's going on, we can get there a lot easier. And I don't want to say quicker, because it's not linear. It's not like we can just say, oh, okay, well, all I have to do then is accept, and then all of a sudden my life gets easier, gets quicker. It doesn't work that way. Problems don't solve themselves just because we want them to. That's for sure.
No, they don't. It reminds me of the concept of Buddhism, honestly, where it's, life is suffering.
Yeah.
Life is suffering because of desire, attachment, fighting, right? They don't say attachment and fighting, but that's what it is. It's attachment and it's fighting.
Right.
And the way to, to not suffer is to let go and surrender and acceptance, and what you were saying. And then the Eightfold Path, which is all of the ways to live that support me letting go and me surrendering and me not, grabbing life by the horns all the time, thinking, oh, I got this, I'll do it, and I'm famous for that. I can't be famous for doing it that way. But it's calmed significantly over time, but that's sort of how I was reared to be. And I love jumping in, and I love taking risk, and I love doing things that I haven't done before. But sometimes, I have to step back, and I have to remind myself, you don't need to wrestle with this. You don't need to fight with this. Just allow it, right? Allow it to move in the way it's going to move. And then whatever time is associated with that is just what time is associated with that. I'm not in charge of that, right?
Right. And you don't have to judge it. You don't have to say, quick or fast or slow or whatever those other adjectives would be, but you don't have to do any of that if it's just allowing and being open. I'm not suggesting that then is less painful. I'm just saying that I think we would all be in a better state, a better mental state, if we allowed each other to feel and to grow from there, for sure.
True. Yeah. Absolutely. Angela, this time has buzzed by. We're coming up toward the end, but I'm so happy you joined me. And if you wouldn't mind, I know I'll have all your links and everything in the show notes, but if you wouldn't mind just letting everybody know where to find you, and where to listen to your podcast, that would be great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Our website is the dunnthatpodcast.com. That's DUNNTHAT podcast.com. And that it gives you links to Apple and Spotify where the episodes are. We finished up season 1 in December, and that had 26 episodes in it. And then season 2, of which Daryl will be a part of, starts releasing on March 13th. And that will be weekly episodes from there. So there will be more to come from me, and lots of other opportunities to work together. But I really hope that the podcast helps your audience and anybody that listens to feel and to remember from where we came and what we need in order to be able to move forward. So I'm really, again, honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Angela. I really appreciate that. And the one thing I love about this stuff is we'll never know who we helped. And it could be somebody digs this up 10 years from now and gets something out of it. And that's what I care about, just whenever it helps and whomever it helps. I thank God for that. And, we continue to try to spread that message. So thanks so much for coming on, Angela. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking real soon.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Daryl.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed When I Stop Fighting the podcast, please check out my books and my journals on my website, DarylDittmer.com. Enjoy a 15% discount by using the code PODCAST, DARYLDITTM